Hey friends, tonight we're setting sail into the mysterious world of the Vikings, a people whose lives were filled with adventure, hardship, and legends that still echo across time. From icy fjords to stormy seas, from longhouses filled with stories to battlefields that shaped kingdoms, the Viking world was as fascinating as it was unforgiving. While movies often make them look like unstoppable warriors, the truth is far more human, and in many ways, even more incredible. Before we dive in, take a moment to subscribe if you truly enjoy exploring history with me, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I love seeing this global community connect through the past. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable. Maybe let the sound of the night or a fan set the mood, and together, let's drift back into the age of the Vikings. Imagine for a moment the cold northern seas stretching endlessly before you. The wind carries a salty bite, and the sound of waves crashing against wooden hulls echoes across the water. In the distance, you can almost see the outline of a longship, its dragon-headed prow cutting through the mist, its sail painted with bold stripes of red and white. On board stand men and women who have become the stuff of legend, the Vikings. But behind the stories of raids and battles, behind the myths of gods and monsters, lies something far more human, a culture rich with tradition, values, and ways of life that shaped an age. Tonight, as you settle into this story, we will begin a journey through Viking life and legends. Not be a tale told in haste. We will walk slowly through their world, imagining the crackle of their hearth fires, the taste of their feasts, the rhythm of their songs, and the whispers of their sagas. The Vikings were not just warriors. They were farmers, traders, poets, and dreamers. And to understand them fully, we must step inside their homes, sit at their tables, and listen to the voices of their ancestors. The Viking world was rooted in both land and sea. Picture a small Scandinavian village, perhaps somewhere along a fjord in Norway. The houses are long and narrow, built from timber and covered with turf to keep out the bitter winter cold. Smoke curls from the roof as families gather around the fire inside. Here, children sit wide-eyed, listening to stories of gods and heroes, tales passed down by their elders. These were not bedtime stories simply for amusement. They were a way of teaching, of preserving memory, of keeping alive a sense of who they were. Food was central to their culture, not just for survival, but also for community. Imagine a Viking feast: roasted meats, fish pulled fresh from the sea, bread made from barley, and ale brewed from honey and grains. At these gatherings, there would be laughter, storytelling, sometimes music played on simple instruments like flutes or lyres. And in between, there would be moments of silence when a skald, a poet, would rise to recite verses of old sagas. These poets were highly respected, for they were the keepers of history, weaving together myth and memory into words that lived on long after battles had ended and kings had died. And what is their beliefs? For the Vikings, the world was alive with gods, spirits, and unseen forces. To them, every storm was Thor's hammer striking the sky, every bountiful harvest a gift from Freya, and every death a thread woven by the Norns, the weavers of fate. At the center of their universe stood Yggdrasil, the great tree that connected all realms, Asgard, the land of the gods, Midgard, the world of men, and the darker places where giants and the dead resided. These stories were not abstract myths. They explained the mysteries of life and death. They gave meaning to suffering and joy, and they taught lessons about courage, loyalty, and destiny. If you imagine sitting in a Viking hall on a cold winter night, the firelight flickering on wooden walls, you might hear one of these stories being told. Perhaps the tale of Odin sacrificing his eye for wisdom, or the thunderous battles of Thor, or the tragic beauty of Balder, the god of light. These stories filled the silence of long winters, wrapping the people in a shared imagination. And in their hearts, they believed that their own lives were part of this larger saga, that their actions echoed in the halls of the gods. But not all was myth and story. The Vikings were practical people as well, deeply tied to the land and sea. Their craftsmanship was extraordinary. They carved intricate designs into wood and bone, not just for beauty, but also as symbols of protection and power. Their ships, perhaps their greatest achievement, were masterpieces of engineering, swift, light, and strong, able to glide across open oceans and shallow rivers alike. With these ships, they reached far beyond Scandinavia, to England, Ireland, France, Spain, even as far as Constantinople and North America. It is here that legend meets reality, for their voyages became the stuff of myth to those who encountered them. To some, the Vikings were terrifying raiders, burning monasteries and taking treasure. To others, they were traders bringing goods from distant lands, furs, amber, iron, and silver. And to themselves, they were explorers, seeking fortune, glory, or perhaps simply a better life. What made the Vikings so remarkable was not only their skill in battle or their daring in exploration, but also as the fire burns low in our imagined Viking hall, and as the night deepens, we come to the end of this first chapter in our journey. We have glimpsed their homes, their feasts, their gods, and their ships, but there is much more to uncover. For behind every story lies another waiting to be told, and behind every tradition lies a deeper truth. And so, as dawn breaks on the horizon of our tale, we prepare to set sail with the Vikings themselves, to leave behind the quiet hearth and step into the roaring sea. For their true legacy lies not only in how they lived at home, but in how far they ventured into the wide, uncertain world beyond. As the sun rises over the fjords, casting a golden shimmer on the dark waters, the longships of the Vikings begin to stir. Each vessel, slender and dragon-headed, rocks gently as men and women prepare for a journey that might take them far from home into lands unknown. The smell of salt, wood, and tar mixes with the crisp morning air. On the decks, oars dip rhythmically into the sea, while sailors hum songs that have traveled across generations, songs that tell of heroes, storms, and the gods who watch over them. Viking voyages were not mere adventures, they were lifelines, paths of survival, trade, and ambition. Life in Scandinavia was harsh, and sometimes the land could not support a growing population. The seas became both a challenge and an opportunity. With their remarkable ships, they could reach distant shores, explore uncharted territories, and encounter other cultures. Imagine standing at the prow, feeling the wind whip against your face, knowing that across the waves lay new worlds, new people, and perhaps new riches or dangers. But the Vikings were careful navigators. They did not simply drift aimlessly. They read the clouds, the stars, and the flight of birds to guide them. They used landmarks and knowledge passed down from generations. Each voyage was planned with both precision and a touch of intuition. For many, these journeys were as much spiritual as practical. The sea was a living force, full of danger, but also full of promise, and to cross it was to participate in a secret tradition. When they arrived at distant shores, the Vikings left their mark, for better or worse. To some, they were feared raiders. Monasteries in the British Isles, for example, trembled at their approach, their wooden halls aflame with fire, and their treasures carried off to foreign lands. But the Vikings were also traders, bringing with them goods from the north: furs, amber, iron, and intricate crafts. In exchange, they acquired silver, spices, and fabrics from the lands they visited. Courts and markets became vibrant centers where cultures collided and merged, each encounter leaving a trace in the stories and objects that survived. Life on these voyages demanded discipline, courage, and resilience. Imagine a storm blowing in from the west, waves towering like mountains, the wind tearing at sails, and the deck slippery with salt water. Men clutch ropes, shouting orders over the roar of the sea. In those moments, courage is tested, and teamwork becomes not just necessary, but life-saving. Yet even in the midst of danger, there is rhythm and familiarity, the chant of oars, the smell of the ship's timber, and the stories passed along to keep fear at bay. On calmer days, the Vikings would fish, mend nets, or carve intricate patterns into wood, keeping hands busy and minds sharp. They would recount tales of Odin's wisdom, Thor's strength, and Loki's cunning. These stories were more than entertainment. They were ways of understanding the world, of learning lessons, of preparing for challenges yet to come. Every journey, whether for trade, exploration, or conquest, became a story in itself, woven into the larger tapestry of their culture. When they reached foreign lands, the Vikings showed remarkable adaptability. In some places, they built temporary settlements, integrating with local communities. Archaeological finds in parts of England, Ireland, and even as far as Russia reveal evidence of Viking influence in local architecture, language, and trade practices. They were not merely conquerors. They were settlers, farmers, craftsmen, and sometimes even diplomats. Imagine the scene: a Viking merchant trading silver coins for woven cloth. A blacksmith. Perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects of these voyages was the encounter with new ideas and cultures. The Vikings absorbed knowledge, technologies, and practices from the people they met. They learned navigation techniques, agricultural methods, and craftsmanship from distant lands, bringing these innovations home to Scandinavia. Their culture was dynamic, shaped not only by tradition, but by interaction, curiosity, and adaptability. Yet for all their bravery, the Vikings were also deeply human. Homesickness, fear, and longing for family accompanied them on long voyages. Letters were rare, and news from home could take months to reach a distant shore. Despite the challenges, the bonds between crew members were strong, forged in shared labor, shared meals, and shared stories. They relied on each other, not just for survival, but for the small comforts of companionship and laughter in an often unforgiving world. It was during these journeys that the Vikings' connection to their mythology became most tangible. Each voyage was a test of courage, wisdom, and fate. Before setting out, some would offer sacrifices to the gods, seeking favor for safe passage or bountiful trade. They might carve runes into wood, seeking protection from unseen forces, or recite poems invoking the blessings of Odin, Thor, or Freya. These rituals were not mere superstition, they were a part of their worldview, a way to navigate uncertainty with courage and reverence. Even in foreign lands, the Vikings maintained their customs. They celebrated festivals, shared stories, and continued their traditional crafts. They were bridges between worlds, carrying their culture across seas and rivers, leaving legacies in both tangible artifacts and the whispered tales of generations. Their journeys illustrate not only daring and skill, but also a remarkable capacity to connect, adapt, and leave an enduring mark. As our imagined longship sails toward the horizon, the sun dipping low and painting the waves with fire, we sense the beginning of another chapter. For the Vikings, life was never just about reaching a destination. It was about the journey itself, the people they met, the lessons they learned, and the stories they carried back home. Each voyage was an echo of the previous, a thread woven into the grand tapestry of their history. And so, as night falls on this chapter of our story, we leave the longship to glide silently over the waters, carrying dreams, fears, and legends alike. Ahead lies the exploration of their home life, their families, and the traditions that bound them together, showing us that behind every raid, every conquest, and every tale of adventure, there was a people with hearts, minds, and culture as rich and deep as the seas they crossed. As our longship drifts closer to the familiar fjords of Scandinavia, leaving behind distant shores and the echoes of foreign lands, we step back onto the soil of the Vikings' homeland. Here, among the forests, mountains, and rivers, life pulses with a rhythm shaped by the seasons, by the work of hands, and by the stories whispered around hearthfires. To truly understand the Vikings, we must leave the roar of the ocean behind and enter their hose, where every detail tells a story of resilience, tradition, and human connection. Imagine walking through a small village at dawn. Smoke curls lazily from the chimneys of longhouses, the scent of burning wood mingling with the earthiness of livestock and freshly tilled soil. Each longhouse is more than a shelter. It is the heart of family life. Inside, the space is warm, filled with the soft glow of a central hearth that serves as both kitchen and gathering place. The walls are adorned with tapestries, carved wooden beams, and simple tools, each reflecting the daily lives and craftsmanship of the inhabitants. Every object has a purpose, yet many also carry beauty, demonstrating the Vikings' deep appreciation for artistry and symbolism. Family life was central to Viking society, and each member had defined roles that were respected and valued. Women, often the backbone of the household, managed the home with authority and skill. They cooked meals over open fires, tended gardens, brewed ale, and cared for children. But their influence extended beyond domestic duties. Women could own property, manage farms, and in some cases, even represent their families in negotiations or disputes. The image of the Viking woman often conjures strength, independence, and wisdom, reflecting a society that valued capability alongside courage. Food, preparation, and ritual were deeply entwined in Viking culture. Mealtimes were occasions for community and conversation. Imagine a hearty meal, roasted meats and fish freshly caught from rivers, barley bread, cheese, and ale brewed from honey or grains. Feasts could last for hours, with storytelling and songs filling the longhouse. Certain foods held symbolic value. Mead, for instance, was more than a drink. It was a beverage of celebration, often consumed during festivals or special gatherings to honor gods, mark seasonal changes, or commemorate significant events. These rituals created cohesion within the community, grounding daily life in a sense of shared purpose and identity. Seasonal festivals, were among the most significant expressions of Viking culture. During Yule, for example, families would gather to celebrate the winter solstice, offering sacrifices to ensure fertility, prosperity, and protection for the coming year. Fires burned brightly, music played, and the air was filled with laughter, song, and the aroma of spiced foods. Another festival, Midsummer, celebrated the long days of sunlight, marking a time for agricultural abundance and communal joy. These moments were not mere distractions from survival. They were central to the social fabric, teaching lessons of gratitude, preparation, and reverence for the cycles of nature. Craftsmanship and artistic expression were interwoven with daily life. Carving, weaving, and metalwork were more than practical endeavors. They were expressions of identity and status. A simple wooden bowl could carry intricate patterns, a sword might bear etchings invoking the protection of the gods, and clothing might feature symbolic designs meant to convey lineage or allegiance. Every creation told a story, a visual language that communicated values, beliefs, and aspirations. This appreciation for artistry, even in everyday items, speaks to a culture that found meaning and beauty in labor, blending functionality with aesthetics. But Viking culture was not solely about survival and ritual. It was also about storytelling, humor, and the joy of human connection. Sagas, poetry, and music were threads that wove communities together. Skalds, the poets and storytellers, were highly esteemed for their ability to preserve history, teach moral lessons, and entertain simultaneously. Imagine the resonance of a skald's voice echoing in a longhouse, recounting epic battles, heroic deeds, and the cunning of tricksters like Loki. These narratives reinforced communal values, strengthened identity, and allowed each generation to feel connected to a larger, ongoing story. As we imagine the sun setting over these Viking homesteads, painting the longhouses in amber light, it becomes clear that the essence of their culture was balance between work and celebration, courage and caution, tradition and innovation. Each day was structured to honor life, family, and the gods, while also nurturing curiosity, skill, and creativity. It is in these details, the way a bowl is carved, a story is told, a feast is prepared, or a song is sung, that the soul of the Vikings truly emerges. Yet even amidst this stability, the world beyond the fjords called to them. The longing for exploration, the pull of the unknown, and the promise of adventure lingered constantly, echoing from the tales passed down from ancestors who once ventured far across the seas. And so, as night blankets the village and the flickering firelight dances across wooden walls, the Vikings' story begins to shift once again from hearth and home to the wider world. For the traditions and lessons learned in these longhouses would guide them on the seas, in foreign lands, and into the annals of history. Life in foreign lands demanded adaptability. The Vikings observed local customs, learned new techniques, and sometimes settled temporarily or permanently. Archaeological discoveries reveal that in parts of England, Ireland, France, and even Russia, Vikings lived among local populations, influencing architecture, language, and culture. Imagine a Viking blacksmith teaching local artisans to forge iron more efficiently, or a trader explaining the value of amber, silver, and furs. In marketplaces, a blend of languages, gestures, and shared commerce created a lively, almost theatrical interaction, with negotiation, storytelling, and humor playing key roles. Religion and mythology remained central, even far from home. Before setting up camp or entering a foreign town, Vikings often performed rituals to ensure protection and good fortune. They carved runes into wood, recited prayers to Odin, Thor, and Freyr, and made offerings to the spirits of land and sea. These practices were both spiritual and practical. They provided a sense of control in uncertain environments, reinforced communal identity, and reminded the Vikings and their new neighbors of the world's deeper mysteries. One of the most remarkable aspects of Viking exploration was the way their myths traveled alongside them. Tales of Thor's hammer, Odin's wisdom, and Loki's cunning were not confined to the fjords. They were shared at trading posts, recited around foreign fires, and absorbed into local folklore. Even today, remnants of Norse mythology can be traced across Europe, a testament to the enduring power of their storytelling. Imagine children in faraway lands hearing a Viking saga for the first time, their imaginations ignited by distant gods and heroic deeds, connecting them to a culture thousands of miles away. Yet life abroad was not without danger. Storms, unfamiliar terrain, and hostile encounters tested the Vikings' skill, courage, and resilience. Raids, though often remembered in history as acts of violence, were only one aspect of their expeditions. Many voyages were peaceful, trading missions, exploration, or migration. The ability to read the environment, understand human behavior, and adapt quickly was as crucial as skill with an axe or sword. On calmer days, they fished, repaired ships, and taught their companions to craft tools or weapons, all the while keeping the rhythm of life afloat amidst uncertainty. Cultural exchange was subtle but profound. Vikings influenced and were influenced. Local craftsmen adopted their designs. New words entered languages. Architectural techniques evolved. A home built in a Viking settlement might carry elements of Scandinavian design, combined with local building traditions. Clothing might incorporate materials or patterns from distant regions, blending practicality with beauty. Through these exchanges, the Vikings left tangible and intangible marks, shaping the world around them, while continuing to carry the essence of their own culture. Trade networks extended even further than most realize. Vikings navigated rivers deep into what is now Russia, connecting the north to Byzantium, the Mediterranean, and beyond. Through these routes, silver coins, exotic spices, fine textiles, and crafted goods flowed northward, while northern furs, amber, and iron moved southward. These networks were more than economic. They were conduits of ideas, art, and technology. Imagine a craftsman in Constantinople admiring a finely wrought Scandinavian sword, or a trader in Kiev marveling at intricately carved wooden figures from the north. Each exchange carried not only material value, but also the story of distant lands, peoples, and traditions. Amidst these journeys, the Vikings' connection to family and home remained strong. Letters were rare, but oral messages and returning travelers carried news of births, marriages, and hardships. The longing for hearth and family motivated many to return home, bringing both wealth and wisdom. The sagas frequently speak of these dual desires, the call of adventure and the pull of hearth, the excitement of new horizons and the comfort of familiar shores. This balance between exploration and home, risk and safety, created a cultural tension that shaped their stories, laws, and daily lives. By traveling, trading, and interacting with the world beyond Scandinavia, the Vikings demonstrated that their legacy was more than warfare. They were connectors of worlds, explorers of human experience, and transmitters of culture. Every longship that returned to the fjords carried not only gold, silver, or exotic goods, but also knowledge, stories, and lessons learned from encounters with the wider world. Their influence spread across continents, leaving traces that historians, archaeologists, and storytellers continue to uncover even today. As evening falls on this chapter of our journey, we see the Viking world in its full richness, a society deeply rooted in home and tradition, yet constantly reaching outward, adapting and exchanging with the unknown. The longships may rest in harbors, the sails furled, and the oars stowed, but the impact of these voyages continues to echo in stories, artifacts, and the enduring fascination with their culture. Our next chapter will delve even deeper into the heart of their mythology, exploring how these legends were not merely tales, but frameworks for understanding the world, guiding behavior, and shaping the identity of a people who lived between the known and the unknown, the mundane and the divine. As the longships rest quietly in distant harbors, the Vikings' minds often turned inward toward the unseen forces that shaped their world. The gods were never distant abstractions. They were present in every aspect of life, from the rising of the sun to the turning of the seasons, from battles fought on foreign shores to the planting of crops at home. To understand the Vikings, one must first enter the realm of their mythology, a living, breathing tapestry of stories that guided thought, inspired courage, and wove communities together. Thor, the thunder-wielding protector of gods and men, loomed large in Viking imagination. Every storm, every crack of lightning across the northern skies was a reminder of his power. Warriors called upon him before battle. Farmers sought his favor for protection against natural calamities, and children marveled at the tales of his adventures. Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, became both a symbol of protection and a token of identity, often carved into jewelry or weapons, reminding the Vikings that courage, strength, and resilience were not just virtues. Freya represented other facets of life: prosperity, fertility, love, and beauty. Farmers might offer small sacrifices to Freya to ensure a bountiful harvest, while families celebrated love, marriage, and the mysteries of life under Freya's watchful eye. The gods, in all their diversity, created a framework for understanding the world, a guide to conduct, morality, and survival, as well as a source of comfort in the face of uncertainty. Loki, the trickster, provided lessons of cunning, cleverness, and the consequences of mischief. His tales were not simply for amusement. They reminded the Vikings that intelligence and strategy could be as powerful as strength, and that chaos, when mismanaged, could bring ruin. In a society that valued bravery and skill, Loki's stories highlighted the need for wit, adaptability, and vigilance. Mythology was inseparable from daily life. Before setting out on a voyage, a family might carve runes into wood, invoking protection or guidance. Hunters and warriors offered prayers for success. Farmers made small offerings for fertile fields, and skalds recited tales that reinforced cultural identity. Even entertainment, music, and festivals were imbued with mythological significance. Imagine a Yule celebration, where the warmth of the fire, the clinking of cups, and the singing of songs intertwined seamlessly with stories of gods and heroes. The sacred and the social existed side by side, creating a culture in which narrative shaped understanding, morality, and even strategy. Heroes of myth were mirrored by real Viking deeds. Legendary figures such as Ragnar Lothbrok or Ivar the Boneless became the subjects of sagas, blurring the line between history and myth. Their stories emphasized bravery, cunning, and honor, offering templates for behavior and ambition. In recounting these tales, skalds connected the everyday lives of their listeners with the grandeur of legendary exploits, inspiring young warriors and reminding elders of the virtues that defined their society. Beyond the tales of gods and heroes, mythology provided a moral compass. Concepts such as honor, loyalty, courage, and fate guided actions both at home and abroad. A man preparing for battle, a woman managing her household, or a child learning a craft would be constantly aware of these principles, taught through narrative and ritual rather than written law. Sagas and stories served as living manuals, embedding lessons into memory, conversation, and culture. Vikings also believed in the mystical forces of the world around them. Spirits inhabited forests, rivers, mountains, and seas, and respecting these forces was essential. Disrespect could bring misfortune. Reverence could bring protection. This worldview encouraged harmony with the natural environment and cultivated attentiveness to detail, foresight, and caution. Imagine a farmer leaving small offerings at the edge of a forest before entering to gather wood, or a sailor casting a coin into the sea to appease the spirits before setting sail. Such acts were practical, symbolic, and deeply meaningful, binding the people to both the seen and unseen worlds. Festivals and rituals were natural extensions of these beliefs. Seasonal changes were celebrated with joy and reverence. During midsummer, the long days of light were honored with fire, music, and feasting, marking both agricultural abundance and spiritual balance. During Yule, families honored the winter solstice, offering sacrifices, sharing food, and recounting the grand stories of gods and ancestors. Every festival, every feast, was both a celebration of life and an act of cultural preservation. Storytelling, in particular, was the heartbeat of Viking culture. Skalds were not merely entertainers. They were educators, historians, and cultural preservers. Their words carried history, philosophy, and morality, ensuring that even across generations, the wisdom of ancestors endured. Imagine sitting by a fire, listening as a tale unfolds, heroes navigating treacherous seas, gods intervening in human affairs, villains meeting their downfall. These stories were immersive, shaping imagination, values, and identity in a society that prized memory, oral tradition, and shared experience. It was through this intricate weave of myth, ritual, and daily practice that the Vikings created a culture resilient enough to endure beyond the centuries. Their gods inspired courage, their stories taught morality, their rituals bound communities together, and their heroes provided models of behavior. By intertwining belief and action, narrative and practice, the Vikings cultivated a sense of purpose and belonging that guided them both at home and across the seas. As the night deepens in our imagined longhouse, the fire flickering and shadows dancing along wooden walls, we sense the profound connection between myth and life. The gods, heroes, and spirits are not distant. They are present in every decision, every journey, and every act of creation. And as we prepare to leave the warmth of the hearth for the wider world once more, we carry with us the knowledge that Viking culture, deeply rooted in tradition, yet constantly reaching outward, is a testament to human imagination, resilience, and the enduring power of story. As the cold northern winds sweep over fjords and forests, the Vikings' world extends beyond the longships, hearths, and festivals. Life was not always peaceful. It was also shaped by conflict, by daring ventures across foreign lands, and by the strategies and heroism that made the Vikings renowned across Europe. Yet even in war, their culture, beliefs, and sense of honor guided their actions, transforming every raid or battle into more than a mere fight for survival. It became a continuation of the stories that shaped their identity. Imagine a group of Vikings preparing for a voyage not of trade, but of conquest. The longships are drawn to the water's edge, polished oars resting in the grooves of the hulls, shields strapped along the sides, weapons sharpened and gleaming. Each warrior carries the weight not just of armor and blade, but of tradition, expectation, and the lessons of the gods. Thor's hammer, carved into amulets and swords, provides courage. Odin's wisdom guides decisions, and the sagas of past heroes inspire every action. The preparation is methodical, precise, and infused with ritual. A small offering to the gods, runes carved into wood, and a moment of reflection for the journeys ahead. The first strike of a Viking raid was often swift and unexpected. Longships moved silently, their low drafts allowing them to glide into shallow rivers and along coasts unseen by those who assumed safety behind walls. Imagine the scene: dawn fog rolling off the water, the faint sound of oars dipping into the waves, and suddenly the presence of men and women whose reputation precedes them. Fierce, strategic, and unyielding. Yet despite the fear they inspired, the Vikings were not mindless marauders. Planning, intelligence, and observation played crucial roles. They studied the terrain, observed the movements of defenders, and relied on both experience and instinct to make split-second decisions that could mean victory or disaster. Battles themselves were as much psychological as physical. The sight of a wall of shields, the coordinated charge of warriors, and the rhythmic chants before an engagement were designed to intimidate as much as to defend. Leadership mattered profoundly. A chieftain or jarl who could inspire loyalty, demonstrate bravery, and make shrewd decisions held the power to determine the fate of not only his crew, but also entire settlements. The battlefield was an arena where culture, honor, and faith converged. Every swing of a sword, every block with a shield, was guided by training, instinct, and the stories of heroes who had faced impossible odds before. Yet the Vikings' reputation as warriors was complemented by a unique sense of strategy and adaptability. They could be raiders, explorers, traders, or settlers, shifting roles as circumstances demanded. Some raids were violent, but many missions combined intimidation with negotiation, sometimes resulting in tribute or alliance rather than bloodshed. They understood the power of reputation and psychological influence. By blending courage with calculation, they maximized both survival and profit. Imagine a Viking negotiator presenting gifts to a wary lord, simultaneously demonstrating strength through the presence of armed men, while also invoking the respect of honor and tradition. A delicate balance of diplomacy and intimidation. Even in the chaos of war, mythology and ritual shaped every decision. Warriors might recite prayers to Odin for wisdom, Thor for strength, and Freyr for protection over lands and crops they would leave behind. Shields and weapons bore symbols of divine favor, connecting mortal action to cosmic significance. Every swing of a sword, every defensive formation, was infused with the understanding that the gods were watching, that courage and honor would be remembered, and that heroic deeds were the threads from which sagas were woven. Heroism was celebrated both in life and after death. A warrior who fell bravely in battle was honored, remembered in stories, and believed to be welcomed into Valhalla, Odin's hall, to continue the eternal struggle alongside other heroes. Tales of legendary figures such as Ragnar Lothbrok, Bjorn Ironside, or Ivar the Boneless exemplified courage, cleverness, and sometimes cunning ruthlessness. These stories were passed down orally, inspiring generations, reinforcing societal values, and connecting the living to a past filled with remarkable deeds. Despite the ferocity of raids, the Vikings' culture emphasized honor and ethical conduct within certain bounds. There were rules to combat, respect for allies and family, and social consequences for cowardice or betrayal. Violence was contextualized within moral and cultural frameworks, making it not just a tool for survival, but a measure of character and community standing. Families and villages judged warriors not only by victories, but by courage, loyalty, and adherence to cultural codes. Imagine a chieftain evaluating his men not only on their skill with weapons, but on their ability to act with wisdom, uphold the honor of their clan, and balance bravery with strategy. The influence of these practices extended beyond individual battles. The experience gained from raids, skirmishes, and defensive campaigns informed shipbuilding, navigation, and tactical planning. Knowledge acquired abroad was adapted at home, influencing military innovations and enhancing cultural resilience. The interconnectedness of myth, culture, and practical experience ensured that every expedition, whether for conquest or trade, contributed to the collective wisdom of the Viking people. It was through these interactions with both allies and adversaries that Viking legends grew. Villages recounted tales of their approach, terrifying yet awe-inspiring. Stories of clever maneuvers, heroic acts, or extraordinary endurance traveled back to Scandinavia, reinforcing reputations and providing lessons for future generations. The line between history and myth blurred, as real deeds became immortalized in sagas, songs, and poems. Young warriors grew up not only practicing combat skills, but internalizing the courage and wisdom exemplified by those who had ventured before them. Even as battles raged across foreign lands, the Vikings' sense of home and family remained central. Warriors fought not for the thrill alone, but for the protection and prosperity of their communities. Success in raids could mean wealth for farms, security for families, and the resources to continue traditional celebrations and festivals. Mythology, culture, and warfare intertwined seamlessly, creating a world in which courage, faith, and human connection were inseparable. As the sun sets on these imagined battlefields, casting long shadows over rivers and forests, we see that Viking warfare was not merely about conquest or fear. It was a complex blend of strategy, courage, ritual, and culture. It reflected the values of a society that celebrated heroism, honored the gods, and balanced aggression with wisdom. The tales of battles, raids, and heroism became more than stories. They became cultural memory, shaping identity and guiding generations long after swords were sheathed and longships returned to fjords. As the echo of battle fades and the longships return to calm harbors, the Vikings' world opens into another realm, one of creativity, craftsmanship, and intellectual ingenuity. Beyond the fierce reputation of warriors and explorers, these northern people were artisans, inventors, and cultural innovators, weaving beauty and meaning into the fabric of daily life. To understand the Vikings fully, we must now leave the roar of the ocean and the clash of swords and step into workshops, market squares, and the quiet corners of their homes, where the imagination shaped both objects and ideas. Imagine a Viking workshop at dawn, sunlight spilling through narrow windows onto tables covered with tools, wood shavings, and partially carved pieces of ivory and bone. Here, craftsmen bend over their work, hands steady, eyes focused, hearts patient. Each carving, whether on a weapon, a piece of jewelry, or a ship's prow, carries both function and symbolism. Dragons, serpents, and intricate knotwork twist along the wood and metal, not just as decoration, but as protective symbols and expressions of identity. These designs are instantly recognizable, speaking to a shared culture even across distant lands. Metalwork was among the most prized of Viking crafts. Blacksmiths hammered swords and axes that were both deadly and beautiful, with blades tempered for strength and edges sharpened with precision. Shields bore symbolic engravings, often depicting gods, mythological creatures, or clan symbols. Jewelry, brooches, arm rings, pendants reflected both status and spiritual significance. Gold, silver, and bronze were shaped into patterns that spoke of lineage, allegiance, and artistic skill. Every object told a story, embedding myth, status, and history into daily life. Woodworking extended far beyond household objects. Viking shipbuilding was arguably the pinnacle of their craftsmanship. Longships were marvels of engineering, combining speed, flexibility, and strength. The hulls were designed to glide smoothly over both oceans and shallow rivers, allowing Vikings to reach lands far beyond their homeland. Every plank was carefully shaped and joined, every sail tailored for maximum efficiency. The dragon-headed prow was more than intimidation. It was artistry, belief, and identity carved into every curve. These ships carried warriors, traders, and explorers, transforming craftsmanship into a tool of both survival and legacy. Trade networks amplified the impact of Viking craftsmanship. From Scandinavia to the shores of England, Ireland, France, and even as far as Byzantium, Viking goods were highly valued. Furs, metals, crafted jewelry, weapons, and tools traveled across continents, exchanged for silver, spices, textiles, and knowledge. Imagine a marketplace in Dublin or Kiev, alive with the sounds of negotiation, the clink of coins, and the admiration of finely wrought objects. Through these networks, Viking creativity left tangible marks far from home, influencing local artisans and introducing new styles, techniques, and ideas. Intellectual achievements were subtle but profound. Navigation, astronomy, and observation of natural phenomena allowed Vikings to cross vast oceans with remarkable precision. They read the stars, the flight of birds, and the patterns of tides and currents. They developed maps, practical knowledge of wind and weather, and methods to preserve food and supplies for long journeys. These skills were not abstract. They were life-saving and formed part of the tradition passed down through experience, oral instruction, and meticulous observation. Imagine a young navigator learning the secrets of the northern seas from a seasoned mariner, absorbing practical wisdom alongside tales of gods who guided sailors through storms. Storytelling remained at the center of intellectual life. Sagas, poems, and oral histories recorded not only myth, but practical knowledge, cultural norms, and lessons from previous generations. These narratives served as repositories of strategy, social expectation, and moral guidance. Young warriors learned courage, cleverness, and ethical conduct through stories. Farmers and craftsmen absorbed lessons of diligence, foresight, and innovation. Through narrative, Vikings combined imagination and intellect, creating a living culture where knowledge and myth reinforced each other. Innovation extended to agriculture, architecture, and household management. Tools improved efficiency in farming, woodworking, and metalworking. Homes were designed for durability and comfort, insulated with turf, and oriented for light and warmth. Storage solutions, heating techniques, and domestic organization reflected practical intelligence and a respect for resourcefulness. Every achievement, whether large or small, contributed to a culture of adaptability and creativity, ensuring survival and flourishing in challenging northern landscapes. Viking artistry was not confined to the material world. It permeated social identity. Tattoos, body art, and personal adornments conveyed values, beliefs, and status. Symbolism in design connected individuals to clans, gods, and ancestors. The act of creating and displaying beauty was simultaneously personal and communal, reinforcing bonds within families and villages while projecting cultural identity to outsiders. Art was a language, a way to communicate who they were, where they came from, and what they valued. As the long ships lie quietly in the fjords and the echo of swords and hammers fades, the Vikings' world shifts to a more solemn, sacred realm, that of life after death, ritual, and reverence for ancestors. Death, for the Vikings, was not an end but a transition, a journey guided by gods, fate, and the honor one had earned in life. To understand their spirituality is to understand the depth of their beliefs, the rhythm of their customs, and the ways in which life and death intertwined seamlessly with daily existence. Imagine a village preparing for the passing of a respected chieftain. Smoke curls from the hearth, mingling with the scent of pine and incense, while families gather to honor the departed. This was a time of reflection, storytelling, and ritual. The deceased would often be adorned in their finest garments, weapons, and treasures, items believed to accompany them on their journey to the afterlife. Gold, silver, tools, and even personal objects like combs or jewelry were placed alongside them, symbolic tokens of status, skill, and identity. The most elaborate burials were reserved for the highest-ranking individuals. Ship burials, for instance, were among the most striking expressions of Viking belief. A long ship, sometimes small and symbolic, sometimes full-sized and majestic, would be filled with possessions, offerings, and even animals, then set adrift or buried beneath mounds of earth. Imagine the solemnity of watching such a vessel, whether on fire or resting in a grave mound. The community gathered in reverence, chanting prayers to Odin, Thor, and Freyr. These rites were acts of honor, connecting the living and the dead in a continuum of culture, memory, and faith. Cremation was another common practice, reflecting the belief that fire could liberate the soul and facilitate its journey to the afterlife. Flames would rise from carefully constructed pyres, smoke carrying prayers and farewells skyward. Witnessing such a ceremony, one could sense both grief and celebration, a recognition that life's deeds courage, and honor mattered beyond mortality. Even in mourning, there was a thread of optimism, a hope that the departed would find their place in Valhalla or other realms, continuing their story in the presence of gods and ancestors. Ancestor worship and remembrance were central to Viking spirituality. Families maintained a deep respect for those who had come before, believing that their guidance, protection, and legacy persisted. Shrines, small carvings, or household altars honored forebears, and rituals were performed to ensure their continued favor and presence in family life. Every festival, every offering, every recounted story reinforced the link between generations. Imagine a child learning to carve a simple rune or offering a small gift to a revered ancestor, absorbing the culture of remembrance, respect, and continuity that defined Viking identity. The connection between the living and the dead extended into daily life. Advice, warnings, and inspiration were often framed as teachings from ancestors. Skalds and storytellers embedded ancestral wisdom in sagas, ensuring that lessons of courage, prudence, and skill endured. Even decisions in farming, trade, or warfare could be informed by reflections on ancestral experience, illustrating a society in which memory and heritage were inseparable from action. Vikings believed in multiple realms of the afterlife, reflecting the complexity of their cosmology. Brave warriors might reach Valhalla, Odin's great hall, to feast and fight eternally alongside heroes of the past. Others might journey to Folkvanger under Freya's domain, or to Hel, a more somber but still structured realm. These beliefs reinforced moral and cultural codes, emphasizing honor, courage, and adherence to societal norms. Knowing that fate awaited after death instilled a sense of purpose, guiding behavior, decisions, and relationships throughout life. Rituals were not limited to burials. Offerings to the gods, seasonal festivals, and sacrifices were all tied to maintaining balance, ensuring protection, and honoring the continuity of life. Food, drink, or crafted items might be offered at sacred sites, along rivers, or within the household. Such acts reflected a worldview in which the divine, natural, and human realms were intertwined, each affecting and supporting the other. Imagine a family gathering at the edge of a forest to honor Freya for fertility, or a community offering a portion of harvest to ensure protection from storms. Actions that strengthened both spiritual and social bonds. Even the stories of legendary heroes were intertwined with these beliefs about death. Sagas recounting the deaths of kings, warriors, or adventurers often highlight the courage, honor, and wisdom demonstrated in their final moments. These tales provided templates for behavior, reinforcing societal values while also comforting the living with examples of a meaningful transition from life to afterlife. Sense of mortality was thus inseparable from their sense of purpose, culture, and community. Cemeteries and burial mounds, scattered across Scandinavia and former Viking territories, offer today a window into this spiritual worldview. Archaeological evidence reveals the richness of burial goods, the complexity of ceremonies, and the care with which the dead were honored. Each grave, mound, or ship burial tells a story of life, belief, and connection across generations. These practices illustrate that for Vikings, life was a journey that did not end with death, but continued in memory, ritual, and legend. In the quiet moments after the pyres have cooled and the celebrations concluded, one can imagine families reflecting on the cycle of life, the joys of daily life, the valor of heroes, the wisdom of elders, and the eternal guidance of ancestors. This integration of life and death, past and present, made Viking culture resilient, coherent, and profoundly human. It was a culture in which the spiritual and the practical, the heroic and the domestic, coexisted seamlessly. As night blankets the village, with stars reflecting off the fjords and the longships resting at their moorings, we feel the depth of Viking reverence for life and death. Their spirituality, burial customs, and respect for ancestors remind us that they were a people who understood the fragility and beauty of existence, who sought meaning in both the mundane and the divine, and whose beliefs carried weight far beyond the immediate moment. Centuries have passed since the last longship vanished over the northern horizon, yet the Vikings continue to captivate the imagination of the modern world. Their legacy is not confined to history books or archaeological digs. It permeates culture, literature, art, and even the ways we understand exploration, courage, and ingenuity. To trace their influence is to see the enduring threads of their society woven into our own, bridging past and present, myth and reality. Consider the resurgence of interest in Norse mythology. Gods like Odin, Thor, and Freya have stepped beyond sagas and archaeological records to appear in films, television, and literature. The stories that once guided warriors and farmers are now retold to audiences across the globe, connecting contemporary viewers with the values, humor, and heroism of a distant time. These narratives carry lessons about courage, morality, and human resilience, proving that myths can transcend eras, inspiring imagination and reflection in generations far removed from the fjords of Scandinavia. Modern literature and historical novels frequently draw upon Viking culture, blending historical fact with legend. Tales of longships, daring raids, and heroic deeds are woven into narratives that transport readers into the daily life, beliefs, and adventures of the Vikings. Through this literature, audiences learn not only about battles and exploration, but also about domestic life, craftsmanship, and the intricate social and spiritual structures that shaped the society. Storytelling remains the core of their legacy, continuing to teach, entertain, and inspire. Archaeological discoveries have further deepened our understanding and fascination with Viking life. Excavated longhouses, burial mounds, tools, jewelry, and runestones offer tangible connections to a society that thrived on both skill and imagination. Museums around the world showcase these artifacts, allowing people to touch, see, and feel the craftsmanship, strategy, and artistry that characterized Viking culture. These relics serve as bridges across time, making the distant past tangible and reminding us that history is not merely a set of dates and events, but a living story shaped by human ingenuity and creativity. The Vikings' influence extends to place names, language, and cultural traditions in regions they once reached. In England, Scotland, Ireland, and France, many towns and geographical features bear names derived from Old Norse, a linguistic testament to their presence. Words, expressions, and even legal concepts were influenced by interactions with Viking settlers. These subtle yet enduring imprints remind us that the Vikings were not merely conquerors or raiders. They were cultural transmitters whose reach shaped communities long after their voyages ended. Beyond language and artifacts, the Vikings have inspired modern exploration and adventure. The courage, curiosity, and resilience they embodied continue to serve as models for those who seek to understand the world, push boundaries, and embrace challenges. From sailors and historians to writers and artists, Their spirit endures in endeavors that require daring, skill, and imagination. Long after the fires of their hearths went out, the essence of Viking daring, the drive to venture into the unknown, remains alive in human culture. Festivals, reenactments, and educational programs bring Viking culture to life in contemporary settings. Across Europe and North America, communities gather to recreate traditional crafts, battle formations, and feasts, blending scholarship with performance. Children learn to craft, carve, and navigate while immersing themselves in stories of gods, heroes, and daily life. These events do more than entertain. They educate, foster community, and maintain a tangible connection to a culture that continues to inspire fascination and respect. Art and media have embraced Viking imagery in striking ways. Illustrations, films, and games often draw upon the striking visual elements of Norse culture. Longships cutting through icy waters, intricate knotwork adorning weapons, gods wielding divine power, and landscapes both harsh and beautiful. These representations, while often stylized or dramatized, serve as portals to the Viking world, blending imagination with historical inspiration. In doing so, they sustain interest and curiosity about the society that produced such enduring myths and material culture. Science and research have further highlighted the Vikings' lasting impact. Studies of genetic lineages, trade routes, and settlements reveal the extensive networks they established, demonstrating their role in shaping regional economies, social structures, and cultural exchange. The Vikings' knowledge of navigation, mythology, agriculture, and medicine continues to inform our understanding of technological progress and human adaptability. These discoveries underscore the sophistication of a society often oversimplified as purely warrior-based, revealing a multifaceted civilization that blended exploration, craftsmanship, and intellectual inquiry. Even in daily modern life, echoes of Viking practices endure. Maritime techniques, agricultural methods, and even seasonal celebrations such as Yule find their roots in the rhythms and customs of Northern Europe. The practical wisdom embedded in Viking daily life, from shipbuilding to farming, illustrates a society that was observant, adaptive, and deeply connected to its environment. Modern societies continue to benefit from these lessons, whether consciously or subconsciously, as we navigate the challenges of living in a complex and interconnected world. In essence, the Vikings' legacy is both tangible and intangible, historical and mythological. Their influence can be traced in artifacts, stories, and cultural practices, but also in the enduring human fascination with exploration, courage, and creativity. From the fjords of Scandinavia to the far reaches of Europe and beyond, their spirit continues to inspire, reminding us that human ambition, skill, and imagination can leave a mark that transcends centuries. As night falls across the northern landscape, one can almost hear the echoes of longships cutting through misty waters, the crackle of hearth fires, and the resonant voices of skalds recounting epic deeds. The Vikings, in their fullness, were more than raiders, warriors, or explorers. They were creators, thinkers, storytellers, and innovators. Their legacy lives on, not only in history, but in the imagination, art, and culture of today, connecting modern audiences with a world both distant and profoundly human. As we reach the conclusion of our journey through the world of the Vikings, it is worth pausing to reflect on the remarkable tapestry they wove, a culture defined by exploration, artistry, mythology, heroism, and an enduring connection to both life and the afterlife. Their story is not confined to the past. It resonates in the present, offering lessons, inspiration, and insights that continue to shape our understanding of human potential and resilience. The Vikings were explorers in the truest sense of the word. Longships carried them across uncharted waters, rivers, and coasts, linking distant communities and cultures. These voyages were acts of courage, curiosity, and adaptability. They navigated using the stars, natural landmarks, and accumulated experience, demonstrating a profound understanding of both the environment and human ingenuity. Their journeys remind us that discovery requires not only skill and daring, but also observation, planning, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. At the heart of Viking society was the delicate balance between tradition and innovation. Their craftsmanship, from intricate jewelry to finely forged weapons and sophisticated longships, reflected both practical intelligence and artistic expression. Vikings were not only skilled in survival and combat, but also in creating beauty, utility, and meaning in their world. Every carved rune, every woven pattern, and every architectural detail conveyed identity, status, and cultural memory. This combination of functionality and creativity illustrates the holistic nature of their society, where art and life were inseparable. Mythology, storytelling, and spirituality were central pillars of Viking culture. Tales of Odin, Thor, Freya, and Loki were not mere entertainment. They guided moral decisions, inspired courage, and offered frameworks for understanding the world. These stories informed daily life, shaped rituals, and connected individuals to both ancestors and the design. The sagas of heroes, warriors, and legendary kings preserved wisdom, reinforced societal values, and taught lessons about courage, loyalty, and honor. They remind us that narrative is a powerful tool for transmitting culture, ethics, and identity across generations. The Vikings' approach to life and death reveals a profound understanding of the human experience. Through elaborate burial practices, ancestor veneration, and rituals, they recognized the continuity between past, present, and future. Life was a cycle, and honor, bravery, and virtue extended beyond mortality. Ship burials, cremations, and offerings were more than ceremonial. They were acts of memory and cultural preservation, ensuring that the deeds and values of the living endured in both legend and spiritual belief. Warfare, raids, and heroism were interwoven with ethics, strategy, and cultural codes. Vikings were not merely fierce warriors. They were calculated, observant, and deeply aware of the consequences of their actions. They balanced courage with wisdom, strength with cunning, and aggression with diplomacy. Battles were both practical and symbolic, reflecting societal ideals of bravery, honor, and leadership. In doing so, they created a tradition of heroism that continues to inspire modern audiences, offering examples of resilience, decision-making, and the human capacity to confront challenges with courage. Their legacy is evident in countless aspects of the modern world. Linguistic traces, place names, cultural practices, literature, film, and festivals all carry echoes of Viking influence. Archaeology has revealed not only their tools and treasures, but also their networks of trade, knowledge, and cultural exchange. Modern media continues to draw upon Viking mythology, crafting stories that inspire imagination, exploration, and reflection. These enduring influences demonstrate that the Vikings were more than conquerors. They were transmitters of culture, innovation, and identity whose impact transcends time and geography. Perhaps the most profound lesson of the Vikings is their holistic approach to life, exploration, creativity, courage, ritual, and memory were inseparable. They embraced both the physical and spiritual worlds, understanding that survival, culture, and belief were intertwined. They left no aspect of life untouched, from daily chores to epic voyages, from artistic expression to moral instruction, from honoring ancestors to confronting death. Every act carried meaning, weaving together a society that was resilient, sophisticated, and profoundly human. In contemplating the Vikings today, we are reminded of the power of curiosity, adaptability, and imagination. Their voyages encourage us to explore beyond our comfort zones. Their craftsmanship inspires us to create with purpose and skill. Their stories teach us about courage, honor, and the value of shared cultural memory. Their integration of the practical, the artistic, and the spiritual reminds us that human achievement is multidimensional, and that culture thrives when creativity, observation, and belief work together. As night falls on this imagined journey through fjords, longships, and longhouses, we sense the echoes of the past still resonating. We see the firelight flickering in the hearths of ancestors, hear the songs of skalds weaving tales of gods and heroes, and feel the pulse of a culture that balanced fearlessness with wisdom, tradition with innovation, and mortality with the hope of legacy. The Vikings, in all their complexity, were a testament to human courage, ingenuity, and imagination, a reminder that the stories we create, the art we craft, and the lives we lead can leave an enduring mark on the world. In closing, the Vikings teach us that history is not merely a record of events, but a living narrative that informs, inspires, and challenges us. Their lives encourage us to embrace curiosity, respect our ancestors, honor our values, and pursue both creativity and courage in our own journeys. They show that a culture grounded in observation, belief, artistry, and exploration can endure, inspiring awe and reflection across centuries. The legacy of the Vikings is not confined to the past. It lives in the stories we tell, the art we admire, the adventures we pursue, and the enduring fascination with a people who dared to traverse unknown seas, honor their gods, celebrate life, and leave behind a world richer than they found it. And as we look to the horizon, we carry forward the lessons of courage, creativity, and resilience, qualities that the Vikings embodied and that remain as relevant today as they were 1,000 years ago. And that brings us to the end of tonight's journey into Viking life and legends. We've walked through their halls, sailed with them across treacherous seas, and glimpsed the beliefs and traditions that made their world so unforgettable. Remember, history isn't just about dates and battles. It's about people, their hopes, fears, and the stories they leave behind. If you enjoyed traveling through time with me tonight, consider subscribing to Ancient Dreams so you never miss the next chapter. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. What surprised you most about the Vikings? Share it in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation alive. Until next time, rest well, dream of distant shores, and remember, the past is always closer than it seems. Good night, friends.